Welcome to Shaping the New York City Skyline, the podcast that explores the stories behind the buildings that shape our city. I'm your host, Brenda Slokowski, and I'm here with my co-host,
David Shamshovich.
Hey guys!
Hey!
What's up?
I don't know why I elongated the
I don't know. That's why I said what's up, because it was just like funny.
We're chill. We're vibing.
Yeah.
Guys, it's a Wednesday in the office.
It's a we've dated ourselves again.
We always record on a Tuesday or Wednesday.
We didn't tell. Yeah, do we? Yeah, because that's the days we're in the office.
Exactly.
True.
The other days
They don't know which Wednesday it is.
The other days we're billing
Fine.
time.
From home.
It feels like we're doing time, but we're actually billing time.
It's both.
It's both. We're doing time by
Yeah.
but
Doing time by billing time.
but that's not today. Today we're doing a podcast episode. We just did a podcast episode with the great Peter Papamichael of the VOREA Group.
Amazing guest.
Amazing guest. We didn't even have much to say because he has so much to say that I just want to keep listening to him over and over and over again.
Yeah. And Peter is someone that I have been close to as a client, well, as close as a client and an attorney can get in terms of transactional work and basically everything else.
Yeah, there's not a day that goes by that you don't bring up, oh yeah, I got a thing for Peter I'm doing.
Yeah.
Well, he just has the most interesting out of the box thinking, and the way that he approaches it. He finds out what the other side needs, wants. He tries to make it happen if it's worthwhile to get the transaction moving forward. And nearly every single transaction I've done with him, I think all of the transactions we've done have gone through. They've had, all of them have had these rocky roads sometimes because he's really thinking forward. He's not just thinking, okay, I'm going to buy this place, I'm going to ground lease this place. He's thinking forward as to, well, how do I get as much done before this thing closes? How do I get my permits in line? What's the next thing? And when you hear him, that's the engineer's mind in him.
Yeah.
That's the out of the box thinking. That's the philosophy he has when he talks about Bruce Lee, and you hear why he talks about Bruce Lee and him being malleable and flexible and like a chameleon.
Yeah. And it's also very interesting to see the evolution of his creative thinking because he's been such a long-term client. We've had the pleasure of doing so many deals with him and seeing his creativity flourish over time.
Yeah. And his cousin is Chris Papamichael, who's Matt Schwartz and Chris own, they're co-owners of co-principals of domain companies. And he talks a lot about how the huge influence that Chris has had and how he's been a mentor to him. And yes, Domain is also another long-term client, and we've been part of a lot of the deals where VOREA and Domain team up. And I'm sure, as Peter mentioned, VOREA has done a lot of projects with Domain, but also has gotten guidance, it seems.
Yeah.
Although Peter seems to be doing very well, and it's important that you know the right people to speak to about this stuff. That's the
top tier
relationship that I have.
client. Top tier client.
It's, there's some some clients that you're really drawn to, and Peter's, he really is a down-to-earth guy, and he's, as you can see, when you listen to the podcast, you'll see how he's absolutely brilliant mind. He's also very humble, and I don't think he needs to be, but he knows that he has a huge team, like we all do here at Side and Shine as well, that you rely on. We can't do this stuff. This podcast, our inclusionary housing and transactional group, this firm couldn't function without
A good team.
exactly. And we have a great team, Brenda, Camilla, and the other attorneys here. And it's important to create that culture. It's the culture that we live by in Side and Shine, the one that we want to continue cultivating.
Peter does a really great job of cultivating that at VOREA as well.
Yeah. And you guys have interacted with a ton of VOREA people. We're not going to name names, but they're all great. They're all very smart. They're all entrepreneurial. They're business-minded, and they understand real estate. And it's just a pleasure. He calls himself, a pimple or small. To me, the small doesn't mean unsophisticated. Small doesn't mean small projects. It just means the size of the square footage may be small, but it's still a shop. And he's expanded from development to construction management, and now at brokerage.
The sky's the limit for that guy.
Exactly. He's the one-stop shop for the actual physical development, and we're the one-stop shop for development when it concerns the legal aspect.
VOREA is really doing a great job at shaping the New York City skyline. I did it.
Brenda, I was afraid that we were, because you're going to Skyliners, you're going to listen to Peter's episode, and I think we just dropped the ball on it because
I never dropped the ball. I just can't find that.
There was no opening for
I
that
find
one.
the opening sometimes.
Peter had so many interesting things to say, and I think that everyone is going to enjoy it. I can't wait to listen to it when it's done, because as I was listening to him, he was saying a lot, and I think I need to listen to it again to absorb all the goodies.
Agreed. Well, without further ado, Skyliners, Here he comes, Mr. Peter Papamichael.
The VOREA way.
Hi, David. Hi, Camilla.
Hey, everyone.
Hello, Skyliners. How's everybody doing?
Welcome back. Thanks for joining us again.
We haven't recorded it feels like it's been forever since we've been back on the mic.
It's been a while.
Yeah.
Got to flex my podcast muscles a little bit.
I feel like I'm getting a little bit, rusty, so to speak. So I'm glad that we have.
Don't worry, we're expanding in other ways.
We're definitely getting better, I think. We're getting lots of feedback, but we could use more from our, at this point, trillions, I think, and trillions of Skyliners. Our next guest is putting his hands over his eyes because he didn't want to see me the way he's rolling them. But we have an excellent guest here today.
Very exciting guest, too.
I don't want to say my favorite client.
You can't say that.
You can't say that. You're not allowed
Which is why...
Well, I have favorite clients all around the world. All around the world.
Well, this is the client that I feel the closest to because we've done lots together.
Well, also, favorite could be a tier. It's like best friends. Like you have multiple best friends.
Yeah.
Favorite is a tier.
It's a client I feel is the closest to me because of all the things that we've been through, some of which we'll talk about, most of which we won't, because a lot of them were interesting out-of-the-box ideas from this brilliant person that's sitting across from me right now.
Don't want to give away our trade secrets. If you want to hear about our trade secrets, you can contact us at info@shine.com.
Shameless plug.
Shameless plug.
He's a graduate of Cooper Union, and he graduated with an engineer degree. He's the founder and principal of VOREA Group, a real estate development, brokerage, and construction firm with projects all over the city, including Long Island City, Gowanus, and Mott Haven. He's also the winner of the Up-and-Coming Developer of the Year at the 2023 Commercial Real Estate Awards. Everybody, I'd like to welcome you, Mr. Peter Papamichael.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you for coming and schlepping all the way this way.
Yeah, we appreciate you coming to our secret headquarters at Side and Shine. And I wanted to, I think from day one, the first person that I thought about when I was like, it's got to be Peter. But Peter's has so much going on and is pulled in so many directions. We finally were able to pin you down through guilt, of course. And we have you here. And it's such a wonderful thing to have you here.
Well, I'm really honored to be here. I think it's awesome. I was telling you before I showed up that, you're like, hey, we're doing this podcast. I was like, okay, I don't know, David. I don't know if anyone's going to listen to it. And then I started prepping and listening to the ones like Elliot Spitzer has been on this show. I was like, I'm following Elliot. And then luckily, Ariel was after Elliot. So, he was a strong second act. So happy that he softened the blow a little bit, So.
You're modest, but you're quite the catch. You're at your age, you're very close to my age. You have, so much success, so much experience, and so much to discuss that we're absolutely honored. And you're certainly of the same caliber of guests that we've had, if not better.
Thank you very much. I don't believe it.
But, I will say, when we were talking about guests, your name was actually the first one David suggested.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
And you were the first person he emailed.
Thank you. I know we're not recording, but I am blushing.
Oh, we are recording.
No,
you mean we're not video recording?
Video recording.
That's good.
I was like, wait a second, the thing's not on?
Let us know if you want pictures.
We actually hired a court stenographer.
Oh, yeah.
So you're actually going to see, this is a good idea. We'll talk about it later.
Okay.
Peter, you're a born and bred New Yorker.
Yep.
Right. You were born and raised in Queens.
That's correct.
What part of Queens did you grow up in?
I was born in Woodside, Queens, off of Roosevelt Avenue and like 65th Street. My grandmother still lives there. She's like, I think in her mid 90s, living alone.
Congratulations.
Second floor. Yeah, she's an amazing lady. And we moved to Little Neck, Queens, I think when I was like starting kindergarten. So for the most part, raised in Queens, had a lot of friends in Whitestone. I'm Greek, so a lot of friends in Astoria. So we, really spent a lot of time in Queens.
So you knew Queens.
Yeah.
Maybe, I don't know, the Queens of today is very different probably from the Queens where you grew up.
Yeah, I would say the Queens of today is much trendier and has really come into its own. I think like if anybody has seen what, just to name Long Island City, it's been a focus of ours since, probably 2010. It's unbelievable how much has changed and how, much that market has matured. But I think Queens overall, is getting its own reputation. It's already has its own reputation. I think it rivals Brooklyn in a lot of ways, both in, arts, culture, real estate. I mean, you name it, it's pretty amazing. And now there's like a casino bid, right?
Yeah.
That, our lovely Mets owner, has
That's what I'm hearing recently, that Queens is the new Brooklyn.
Yeah, I think Queens is Queens. It's like it's arrived.
You're not wrong. Queens is Queens.
People always want to make comparisons. It's the new Brooklyn, but it's its own personality. But people want to relate to what's happened in the past because nobody saw. I grew up in Brooklyn, in the Coney Island, Brighton Beach area, and that part of Brooklyn is still not really that cool. But lots of parts are now cool that weren't cool when I was a kid. Williamsburg, downtown. The Dumbo, all those areas, they weren't. Now they're hot. Now you can't even. They rival the prices of Manhattan. It's ridiculous.
Yeah, because Queens is the new Brooklyn and Brooklyn is the new Manhattan.
Yeah. Well, sure. Growing up in Queens, wanting to go to school in the city and living in the city, living in Manhattan was like the vision, right? And then you get to Manhattan and you're like, oh, well, maybe I should live in Brooklyn. And then, you start spending years in Brooklyn we lived, me and my wife lived in Brooklyn probably for like 8 or 9 years before, we were looking to move to Queens, but we wound up moving to Long Island in a little town called Seacliff to raise our 2 daughters. And I think when we bought the house, I think it's 2 years in September, we were the 11th family in a row from Brooklyn to have bought a house in Seacliff. It was like something crazy like that.
Good migration patterns.
Yeah, it was unbelievable. Yeah.
So when you were growing up, what were your parents doing? What were their jobs and what do they do now?
We grew up, I'd say, working middle class. My parents had a pretty amazing work ethic. I have an older sister and a younger sister. Both my parents worked. And, I think my mom ran Filene's basement in Fresh Meadows and in Manhasset. She's like an amazing, ferocious, Greek lady who, is like very smart and, with it. And my dad is a charming 6'3", full head of hair, Greek guy with a mustache who is like, he could speak to anybody from like a president to, a labor foreman to, all walks of life. And I think like that, he worked at the Asia Society on 70th and Park before he retired. He was there for like 30 something years, director of, building services. He ran the whole building for the cultural institution. And he showed me like through like take your kid to work day and like the parties and holiday parties that the Asia Society had. It was like my first exposure to like a company that valued their employees, that had, a culture that was like beyond the, the one job that person did. It was like a community, right? And he often talks to me about the golden years of the Asia Society and how amazing it was. But we had like a field day. We'd go play softball, with the whole company in Central Park. So I kind of always wanted to be part of a company that had all sorts of employees that all got together and spent their time as a family. And I think that was like a really big influence on me wanting to make my own company and, have that level of culture, within the firm.
Yeah, I guess we'll talk about it later, but I would think that some of that would be modeled on VOREA would model some of that.
Yeah, I think we always talk about wanting, a company that feels like a family. And, we really try to embody that in the way we run the business and the types of things that we have as priorities. I think are, we pay attention to your career and what you want out of your career and make sure that, VOREA's got you on a path to meet those goals.
And it feels that way. The few parties that I've been to, I think I was in 3 or 4 Christmas parties holiday parties. And it feels like a family. You know, I don't work with every single person at VOREA. As I was sitting there, I felt you could see
We do
it.
a full sit down dinner for, you and your significant other. And it's a full meal that is typically on I don't want to call it fancy. It just tastes very good, right? So there's like multiple coursing, there's like an open bar. There's like, we're having dinner together. And it's important that, we all know each other because we spend so much time with one another,
I think it's important. And I think it fosters that kind of friendship, also fosters and family feeling, fosters better feelings about where you work and more productivity.
It's a better work environment and success for the company overall.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
I think, especially now, post-COVID, remote environment, a lot of people not necessarily want to come into the office. You've obviously, camaraderie suffers and culture suffers. So just trying to make the atmosphere someplace where you want to be, I think is critical. But, it's like it all stems from the top and the culture makes its way down. Right?
Yeah.
Like for sure.
100%. Your sisters, what path did they take?
Oh, good question. So my sister is Irene, is a Pratt graduate. She's an artist and she teaches art in New York City Public School. And my younger sister recently moved to Austin with her husband and her 2 boys and now 3 boys. So little Paul is the latest addition to the family. So
Congratulations.
yeah, she went to St. John's and she's a speech pathologist, but now she's taking care of her boys for the time being.
So she's taking a break while she's taking care of the...
Taking care of the boys, yeah. And Austin is an amazing city. It was the first time I got to visit and go check it out there. Their house has a pool. It's warm, and culturally, it's like a really cool place.
Yeah, it's a cool city.
Convincing you to move there or convincing you to develop there?
We would consider developing, I'd say, in Texas as a whole. We're looking at something currently in Dallas, but I think Austin would be a great city. I was like shocked at, I think it's called Congress Row or Congress Street or something like that, where there's like a lot of retail, commercial, mixed use. It's a pretty amazing town.
You heard the Ari Off Gang episode, which we talked about briefly,
Sure.
where he's doing some stuff in Texas, and others are doing the same because it's difficult to develop in New York City given the political climate.
Yeah, it's definitely fun to develop in New York City. That's correct. Difficult, you have to.
Did I say fun?
Yeah,
that's what I heard.
Fun is a great adjective.
Yeah. So this is, by the way, this summarizes what Peter is like. Peter enjoys these challenges. He comes up with the most interesting out-of-the-box ideas and makes it so exciting to work for him. Things that I have not seen before. And guess what? He pulls it off.
Well, so far, I've pulled it off a few times. I think I've also not pulled it off once or twice, but you guys don't hear about those, right? Because those deals don't move forward. But
we're not here to talk about those things.
Yeah, we're not here. No, I was just going to say, you mentioned like graduate of Cooper Union, right? And kind of early years into your career. And Cooper, I never expected Cooper to have such an impact on my career and really my life, right? So, engineering school, I had a good friend of the family's who asked me what I was doing with my career. And he's like, where do you want to go? I'm like a senior in high school who scored high on his SATs with like limited direction. And he's like, you can go get a business undergrad, but you'll likely get an MBA. So it's like going to school for the same thing. And he's like, not going to be an English major. You're Greek American. English is really a second language for you. You're not going to excel, And he's like, so what are you going to do? You should go be an engineer. He's like, I got into Cooper Union. It was amazing. You get a perfect job at Con Edison when you're done. You could do anything. You can go to pre-med. You can go into law. You could do whatever you want, So I toured Cooper. I don't know how I got in, but like my dad had reached out to like every architect and every construction consultant he knew. And this guy, Marty Zabatkin, interviewed me to like write a letter of recommendation. He was a graduate of Cooper. So I get in and it was like, guys, it was the hardest set of classes. And like the day they say this at like when you come in the auditorium for freshman orientation, they're like, look to your left, look to your right. You're going to feel like the dumbest person in the room the moment you like walk in, because you're like there with some of the brightest minds in I want to say the world, but it's like the country for sure. And, being in engineering school, not wanting to be an engineer was like a very difficult run for sure. But it taught me how to problem solve on a level I never thought I'd learn. And that has really translated into every aspect of my life. And I have Cooper to thank for that.
Yeah, and for people who don't know Cooper, I think back in the day when you were attending, it was free, which means that it was that much more difficult to get in. It was a very selective program.
My mom got to quit Filene's when I got the award. When I got it, because we didn't have to pay for school.
But they make you. I mean, it's extremely difficult to get in. They only take the biggest and brightest, and the fact that you got in there, though you're saying, well, I feel like the least smart person.
You definitely feel it's a challenge. My first 2 years, I struggled. I think I even failed a class, or the professor felt bad for me, so he gave me a D, and then I had to take a summer course. This is the first time I've ever had school get in my way, or like not be successful at something, right? So I persevered, and my average for the first 2 years, I mentioned this before, was probably in the 2.0 range. It was like daunting that I was like not getting there. And then Marty Zabatkin wound up giving me an internship. And I went and I worked with Marty my sophomore year, summer, and he taught me how to maintain a list and taught me how to project manage. And I was like, I'm a big guy. So, in my late teens, early 20s, I looked like I was 25, or maybe even 30. And I grew some facial hair, and I was an owner's representative directing people that had 10, 15, 20 years of a career, ahead of me. And I had to figure out how to convince them to do something. So I had to make it their idea. I had to learn how to manage up a lot. And I fell in love with, problem solving and managing. And then that just translated to school. So then I get back, junior, senior year, I completely excelled. I think I wound up with an average in the low threes, which is shocking given how low the first 2 years were. But, that internship really changed my life. It helped me convert, working in school and education, and saw the full value of it.
It's an interesting story you tell, because the way that I view it is you simply did not want to go to engineer school. And as a result, you weren't excelling because it wasn't something you were interested in. But when you started applying that knowledge, then it became the light shone.
Keys
That's
to the castle. Yeah, whoa. It totally clicked for sure.
It's hard. It's hard to do something that you don't necessarily want. I was a comp sci major too. I never intended on doing computer science. And it was a rough go, because when you're not enjoying something, it's harder to excel at it.
Yeah, it's funny. I tried to take, so Cooper has architecture, art, and engineering. Those are the three majors that they focus on. And you could take whatever electives you want. So I took poetry. I took all sorts of different things, because I'm you have such this rigorous education. I did stand-up. I joined the Black Student Union. They had me as an honorary member.
By the way, Peter's not black.
And I did 2 nights at their, one of the events where I did stand-up in front of the whole school.
That's phenomenal.
And, I just wanted to
Want to give us a little sampling?
No. Well, I'm making David laugh, No, I just tried to break through the shell. Engineering curriculum is very mundane. You're focused. You're just doing math, doing science, a lot of physics. And it's how do you break out of that? And how do you get comfortable, communicating? Because, working for Marty, I realized that, you have to speak a lot to different people. So I'm just well, I don't want to become, I was always pretty outgoing. I just wanted to, be a little bit more worldly and get more experiences. I used to introduce myself to people on the subway, because I was commuting to Cooper, right? So I was I'm going to meet 1 or 2 new people a day, and I'd just say, hello, hey, how you doing?
Oh my God, red flag. You don't talk to strangers on the subway.
Well,
He skipped that lesson during childhood.
We didn't, the public transportation I took in Queens was the bus system. It wasn't the subway. So,
I guess that makes it a little bit better.
Yeah.
It's the way you're saying resonates a lot with me, actually, because I was in the same boat. I didn't take a stand-up comedy class, but I did take a comedy writing class. I did stand-up, and I did improv and theater for the very reasons that you're stating, because I needed a little of that creativity. And I needed that to get that out of my system a little bit, to balance these really difficult, you're right, science, math, heavy classes.
Sure.
So you start off working Zabatkin Associates, right?
Yep.
How does your first day go? How do you work your way? You're a sophomore in college who knows nothing, I assume, at this point, or very little about development.
I knew nothing.
Being an owner's rep.
The project I was on was the JCC on the Upper West Side. And my first summer there, superstructure was going up. So I just got a chance to understand the players. I think Acme, which was the construction company that I don't know that it exists anymore, but there were, in the nonprofit space, which is where owners reps back in, early 2000s functioned, were around nonprofit institutions. It's a big part of the business, right? So an owner's rep is there on behalf of the owner, and 9 times out of 10, the owner doesn't have, heavy real estate or construction expertise. So they outsource this to an owner's rep. So now nonprofits also, when they're doing a project of the JCC's scale, so this is 76th in Amsterdam, it's like world-renowned contractors, world-renowned architects. So you get exposure to like the best of the best, right? So I was able to see, a union construction process. I was able to see how the information flow worked, all of those tasks. Fast forward now to my junior year summer, and, the project is taking shape. It's enclosed. There's all sorts of other elements of, management that needs to happen, to complete the project. So it was really eye-opening to see the evolution, be able to work on a project, more than, one summer and then come back the other summer and see how it completed and the same cast of characters. And, you get comfortable. And it's like if you were part of a team in high school, or college, that your teammates rely on you. So in an internship, if you could be relied on for some information or for some task and you can succeed, then people know that you're accountable and they know that they could give you more stuff. So it was addictive to have a list of things I needed to accomplish that was like 5 pages long. And I could actually get those things done this week. And that was like what I did. I just tried to accomplish anything people couldn't get done. And it was a lot of fun. It was an amazing experience. And then, we were talking about this before. So 9/11 happens when I go to school my senior year. And one of the project managers on the JCC, a guy named Stuart, was also a fireman. And, he saw a lot, right? Obviously. And he decided that, he didn't want to work for a year or two and he needed to take some time off. So, filling a position post 9/11 in New York City was a challenge. And here's, a young, aggressive intern who is like willing to work and also has history on the project and go to school. So for several months of my senior year, I was working full time, really helping Zabatkin finish that project and get it back on track until they were able to hire a permanent replacement. And that really showed, I think, Marty and his team that, I was a couple years ahead of my years, maybe, and it led to me getting hired as like a second year associate out of college, which got me my first like real jump. And that was awesome. And then, I asked Marty if I could just take the whole summer off before I accepted the position. And he said, okay, you're starting, September 7th or whatever. So that summer, I think I took 27 flights, in Europe, like puddle jumpers. I traveled to Spain, like Madrid was my hub. And I just went all the way through Europe, staying in youth hostels, but taking airplanes from city to city instead of the rail pass, like a little snot. But it was great. I had a lot of fun. And I ran with the bulls. I skydived in Switzerland. I stayed at all sorts of crazy places. It was a lot of fun. I had a blast. And
all the things on my bucket list.
Yeah. My parents and my sister were like, are you going through a midlife crisis? Like, what are you doing? You're going to kill yourself. Like, run with the bulls. My dad said he'll chase me down the driveway with a car. It was like, it's like, what are you doing? But whatever, it's done. And today we're doing an indoor skydiving facility called iFly. And I've already jumped out of a plane and I'm scared to do the indoor tunnel.
The indoor tunnel looks very fun. I've seen it a few times on Instagram. Yeah. A lot of people love it.
Yeah, it's like I could break my hip, Peter,
you're not 70. I don't think so. I think both your hips are going to be in okay shape.
Yeah, it's funny.
So what aspect of this position, clearly you excelled, in my opinion, then it's something that you immediately found very interesting. What do you think really resonated with you?
I think that, I was around a lot of nonprofit institutions, and I have a bit of a business mind that knows how to problem solve and really likes to manage, multiple things at once. So I met this guy named Mitch Rutter, who's the owner of Essex Capital Partners, and he had hired Zabatkin to oversee one of his projects in the boroughs, ground up rental. And we got to talking and he saw in me, I guess, who I am and was like, you could be a real estate developer and it's great that you know how to project manage, but there's a whole other side of the business related to finance, lending, legal. There's just so many components and so many facets. You should be a real estate developer. And honestly, it's what I wanted to do, but I didn't know what it meant. And I transitioned from Zabatkin to Essex Capital. And within a year and a half or two, maybe, of working with Mitch, I saw the real estate business, specifically building in the boroughs, new construction, rentals and condos. And I became the vice president of acquisitions and development very quickly at Essex because I didn't say no. I did everything. Anything Mitch needed done, anything the organization needed, I just jumped all over. So I was like kind of functioning almost in like a COO capacity, but at a very young age. And he gave me plenty of rope to fail. And he let me have it when I failed, but I learned a lot. And Mitch is a lawyer turned real estate developer. So his strategy and the amount of thinking he would do before he would turn documents or, accept an offer or counter really changed my approach to how I looked at real estate and how I looked at negotiation. And that's really what I learned, I'd say, the most of, right? Because I had this project management skill set. I then got a cutting edge related to street smarts, which I believed I had growing up in Queens, but it was now refined at an institutional level. And I'd say it's the combination of those things that allowed me to take advantage of the 2008, 2009 crisis to start my business in 2010.
So how did that occur? You're working for Mitch. It sounds like you were learning a lot. You were there for about 8 or 9 years. And then the financial crisis hits. You don't leave right away. How did that decision come about?
Yeah, I didn't leave right away. There was, we had several deals in the pipeline that were mid-construction. And we had to, like anybody else, reposition one to finish the others, right? So we orchestrated a sale of one deal that then helped us recapitalize the other two that needed to be completed. I was mid-project. I wasn't going to leave, Mitch mid-project. We have commitments, right? We're accountable. Mitch is, one of my biggest mentors. We're closing a deal together now, in Alabama. So he has been what's become a lifelong relationship. And he said, you're first generation Greek American for your family. You're always going to own your own business. You're either going to own a construction business or you're going to own a diner, is what he used to mess around with.
Not that we promote those stereotypes.
Yeah. He ultimately knew that that's what I wanted to do and where I was headed. And it was fine. It the relationship at that time had ran its course. I completed my obligations with him. He was comfortable and I started VOREA.
How did the name VOREA, where did that come from?
Good question. So it's Greek, for those of you wondering. It means north. One of the markets I was really fascinated in was Williamsburg, Brooklyn. After starting VOREA, I had also acquired a leasehold interest on a warehouse building off of Bedford Avenue that I was converting to New York Martial Arts Academy, which was a martial arts business that, I control a fee. And then I also own the business. I trained in I'm laughing. So in college.
So he's actually wearing a black belt right now.
Yeah. So, all right, I'll digress for a minute. So Bruce Lee's martial art is called Jeet Kune Do. Bruce Lee is as much a philosopher as he was a martial artist. So I did Jeet Kune Do when I was in high school, right? I had 2 girls as sisters. I was an only boy, no
so you had
older
to beat them up?
brother.
You had to know how to beat them up.
Irene was an amazing older sister who would beat me up. And I tell my dad that,
as the older sister, I agree.
That is our job.
I'm never going to survive in these inner city schools, just kidding. But so Dino Orfanos is my, it was an instructor and owner of New York Martial Arts Academy. He was my cousin Gus's best friend. And my dad's the baby. So I'm 10 or 15 years younger than my older cousins. So Dino had a martial arts school. I joined. I learned all about Bruce Lee. And Bruce thinks out of the box. So Bruce always says, right, be water, right? Take different shapes and forms based on the situation that you're in. So he would teach you a process, right? Ergonomically, he'd show you how to throw the best punch or, throw the best kick or what was logical, but you had to do it in your own flair and your own style. So you're learning that. You then go to engineering school. You then become a real estate professional. And it's you're a creative. Who knew,
Sounds like you had a lot in common with Bruce Lee.
Oh yeah, me and Bruce. Only I'm still alive. Just kidding.
No, but you're not kidding. You're still alive. That's not.
No, no offense. No offense.
No, he's passed away some time ago. I think the world has gotten over it.
What?
Yes.
Spoiler.
Yes. Unfortunately, and his son
what Bruce
too.
Lee did in 1973 was modern day MMA. So currently you're watching the UFC. It's all over the news, right? You're watching pay-per-views. All that aspect of martial arts comes from Jeet Kune Do, and they don't even know it.
Yeah.
It's like he was decades ahead of his time.
His philosophy, though, in reality, you're saying the malleability, the ability to adapt and be a chameleon. I think that's what he meant when he said about being water. And that's your embodiment. I think that's why you really enjoyed that philosophy, because that's what you've been doing your entire career, essentially.
And also that's what I think we've been training within our staff, right? So we are, if I can get into VOREA for a second, we're a team of engineers, architects, construction professionals that are all thinkers. And we put together like a culture of just problem solving professionals. And we've developed a process to attack any issue through our problem solving skill set. We have SOPs in place. We have like our process of solving is, we call it the VOREA way. But you're your own professional. You have to learn the VOREA way and then apply it however, you want to apply it. But that, I think, is something that you learn within our company, and it's addictive, and it, transcends into the rest of your life.
Yeah. And I've seen this. I didn't know that it was called the VOREA way, but I've seen this because I interact with a lot of VOREA people, more than I think with any other one of our clients. But just to pull back a little bit, when you started the company, right now you have, is it around 50 or so employees?
Yeah. So pre-COVID, we were at like 55. Currently, we're in the like mid to low 40s.
Yeah. So you started, I assume, by yourself. How did you start growing it and then implementing this policy or this way of thinking?
That's a good question. I think so we started VOREA 2010. I was an intern when I was at Zabac and with a guy named Steve Onimus. Steve Onimus would teach me how to think for myself, which was like an interesting approach, right? This is like Google's just coming out, right? So I'd come and ask Steve a question and he's like, oh, let me show you how to Google that question, So it was like an amazing thing. So Steve is an MIT grad, an architect, and we call him the construction and real estate almanac. So Steve could walk any building, tell you what year it was built, tell you the details associated with how the window is assembled. It's insane the level of depth that Steve has. So me and Steve kept in touch over the years. He was no longer at Zabac, and when I started VOREA, we had just acquired 1133 Manhattan Avenue out the gate as a 99-year ground lease, which is our first joint venture with the domain companies, my cousin Chris's company, Chris and Matt. And Steve, I was able to use 1133 as a way to set up a small infrastructure and team up with Steve so we could start VOREA. And that's how that process started. And
why is it that you were doing a ground lease versus an acquisition?
Well, that's a good question. We didn't have any money. So I started VOREA without much capital. And it was a moment in time where the city, there was a crisis, right? So 2010 is right after the crash, real estate's values dropped. And, there were a handful of acquisitions that I was targeting, one of which was 1133. So 1133 was two adjoining buildings that one was for lease and one was for sale. And they were owned by two separate groups. So I met with one group that was in the rags business. They were a generational family and they had no interest in selling. They just wanted a lease. And the building next door was for sale. And I convinced them to buy the neighboring building and allow me to take their 40,000 square foot warehouse that was using balers to compact clothes. They'd sort the jeans with the jeans, the sweaters with the sweaters, and then they'd package them in 1,000-pound bundles and sell them to Turkey or China or whoever. And I solved I shouldn't say solved. I paid attention to how their business functioned, and I helped them build a new warehouse in 10,000 square feet of the new building that they bought. And then I parceled off the balance of that lot coupled with the other lot that they own. And we master leased that for them and built, a 210 unit rental building. And I didn't have the money to buy the building next door. I didn't even have the money to ground lease the site for them. But then that's where my cousin came in. So Chris Papamichael is the co-owner of the domain companies with I say Matt Schwartz, who's also now my cousin.
Wait a minute, we're gonna have to get, how's Matt your cousin?
Through the years, he's like my
he's like cousin, like the bear in the show The Bear, where everybody calls each other cousin.
Maybe, I don't know.
Have you seen the show The Bear with?
I have, but I thought that he
Jeremy
just calls
Allen
that guy cousin because it's his cousin.
No, I don't think it's his cousin. I think it's like saying dude.
Oh yeah,
and they're calling they call each other cousin. I think it's his brother's best friend.
Yeah. Well, I think Greeks culturally, like if you're childhood friends growing up, you consider each other cousins. Yeah. It's like something that.
So maybe it's probably the same thing there.
Yeah. So, Matt's my cousin by association, So, and 1133 was the first, deal we started together. So Chris and Matt, run a national platform that is pretty amazing. And I would say they're real estate developers in the truest sense of the word. Like I would say more a local builder to New York and a problem solver. And I use real estate to solve problems, but I don't know that I'm a developer like Domain is a developer. Like what they do is amazing. It's just a different business.
They are amazing. Domain is also one of our longtime clients. And I don't necessarily agree that your perception of yourself may be less than you think, particularly given the story that you just told, which is, and I think I wasn't at the firm yet, but I believe that we may have worked on the ground lease for 1133.
Alvin did the ground lease for 1133.
Yeah, Alvin did the ground lease.
For sure.
And this is a perfect example of how you think, which is as follows. I want something. I'm going to figure out what this other person wants so that I can get what I want. And this is something that you do constantly, which is brilliant, by the way.
It's a win-win, right? How do we all win? But I'm open about what it is I want to win. So it's not like I'm not duping you. I'm not hoodwinking you into doing what you want to do. I'm just really there to listen, right? So I'm listening to what your problems are and what your goals are. And I try to reverse engineer a solution that makes us both win. Yeah. I'd say
you understand how unique and out of the box that is, where that's a huge advantage you have into convincing people. Everybody says, well, I'll just throw money at it. And if it's no deal, no deal. Nobody's thinking, or very few people are thinking in the way that you are.
Well, if you don't have the capital to throw money at it, you have to solve the problem another way.
Yeah,
right?
Your creativity is for sure a huge asset. That's
biggest
what
asset.
Made VOREA.
Yeah, but money may also not solve things. People are not always just interested, particularly the smaller.
Well, that's completely true.
So you're the way that you're thinking, and this is what you do time and time again. So it sounds like it started from the beginning and it continues to this day, the outside of the box thinking. How do you think you came up with that strategy? That's something you saw when you were working with Mitch?
From his engineering background,
Yeah, outside
that
the
problem
box.
solving has really ingrained in you and you brought it into your business model.
Yeah, it became his superpower.
Yeah.
Yeah, sure. I could see that. Thank you, guys.
So generally, for the years I've been with Alvin, you watch and you see the styles and you pick and choose the things you want and then you do it yourself. I assume he exemplified that, or you just said, you know what, this is the way I want to go about it.
So my first exposure to a 99-year ground lease was on Skirmahorn Street with Mitch Rudder in, developing 63 Skirmahorn Street. So I was part of the ground lease negotiation, and then I was also part of the refi post-closing, right? Post-completion, rather. And I understood the dynamics between fee ownership and leasehold interest. And that was a way to acquire assets without, financing the land, basically, right? So I've applied that strategy now on ground leases, 6 or 7 times. So I've done 6 or 7 ground leases in New York City. And then that has, given us a platform to, have enough money to put a deposit down on the ground lease or start the ground lease. And then as our development took shape and form, we were able to recapitalize the overall development. So it's no different than putting a site under contract but we've also learned now how to be firm with our commitment on acquiring the site by putting money at risk, but taking the time to perfect the business plan to get the project capitalized, right? Which I think was a challenge in 2010, was a challenge post-COVID, and is a challenge again today, given where interest rates are. So, and where capital markets are. So, that's a part of our strategy today. Given where the market is.
And you mentioned your relationship with Chris, which I know is close. And we discussed this a little bit, off of the record. But, you have this company Domain, which is at this point a behemoth. I'm not sure at what stage it was back then. You could have certainly just joined that company, but you decided to open your own. I know you discussed, well, you're a Greek American. Owning a business is the thing I need to do. Why open your own thing?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question. I mean, Chris has been really a mentor to me since I've been in college. Chris realized that I was headed towards the real estate and construction business, and he was in it. He really took me under his wing and went out of his way to talk to me about what I was encountering, what I was doing, all just paying attention. And, he's been instrumental. He's been a sounding board. But, out the gate, I think it came down to proving to myself that I could do it. And honestly, on the deals that we're partners on, we really function like one company. We know where one starts and the other one stops, or whatever the saying is. But there's a zero chance I could have achieved any of this stuff without Chris and Domain, and the level of institutional knowledge that they bring, the level of capital markets relationships, and just the vision that they add to what it is we do. So I think it's morphed into almost like a programmatic approach on large scale, ground up residential buildings in New York.
When you first started VOREA and you picked that first project, I know you had a couple of things going. How did you decide on that? To me, that first site means everything because it sets the tone for your company.
Yeah, well, we had, land, I remember, was between in the borough, $70 to $100 a foot, right? And we've evolved into what's called a thesis-based developer. So we're very thoughtful about every deal that we do, right? We really like to placemake. We really like to understand markets. So I didn't know that's what I was doing, but that's what I was doing in the beginning. So
just to stop you for a second, the thesis-based developer, is that a term that you coined or came up with, or is that an actual... No, you don't know.
I don't know. I don't think we coined it. I mean, I think other people
Peter
call
special.
Them. Yeah.
I don't know if I will call it that.
Yeah, that's fine. No, look, when you're not backed by a fund, when you don't have, a parachute, what I was thinking through was, how do I protect myself from downside, and or how do I protect the company from downside? And if you analyze a market and you have an understanding of all the developments that are going to happen in the next 5 years, every landlord, every, subway station, and you read the subway numbers and you see how people commute and you see how they work, and you can chart where you think this is going to head. And as you're doing that, you can identify, or at least come up with a thesis around supply and demand. And you can figure out what asset classes are either forgotten or aren't being addressed. So I would say that is the basis of how VOREA invests. We figure out the real estate ecosystem. We try to plan for it over a 5 to 10 year trajectory, and we try to solve for supply demand within that ecosystem. And if it's an asset class that we like, or we're excited about, or we want to get involved in, we do it. So, for example, in 2016, we did a thesis on Long Island City. We were investing in Long Island City in the past. One of the first deals I did was on, I think, 44th Drive, right around the time we did 1133. We wound up selling that deal because, it made more sense to sell it and recapitalize the business and grow. But in 2016, 2017, there was a massive amount of residential development happening in Long Island City. The transportation hub in Long Island City is I don't know, unmatched. Maybe, Borough Hall has something to compare it to, but LIC's, E-Train, 7 Train, F, there's, I think, 8 or 9 subway stations that run through Long Island City, and they all go into Midtown. So they all connect to Midtown, which in 2016, 2017 had a different feeling, but it was the financial capital of the world, legal capital of the world, pick the industry, and it existed here. So it was no doubt that, it had, its population was for second, third year associates, working in those fields. And one thing we kept noticing is that as these residential buildings were built, retail was not at their base, with the exception maybe of Rock Rose. So Rock Rose has done its best and they identified that their residential tenants need amenities, and retail has become an amenity within their building. But other than them, it was few and far between. So we created something called an investment triangle within Long Island City, which is Court Square, Queens Plaza, Hunters Point, and Hunters Point South. It's really the only area that subway touches, and with the exception of maybe Queens Plaza North. And we just focused on, mid-size projects, 30,000 feet, 50,000 feet, 20,000 feet, that we could convert to retail. And we did a project on Jackson Avenue. We're currently in the middle of a project on...
that was a ground lease also, right?
That was
Jackson?
a ground lease. Borden Avenue, currently where we're building the iFly, is also a ground lease. And yeah, we just started expanding. And then we stumbled on a street that had a glacier erratic coming out of it that the DOT, wasn't cleaning. And a company called Craig Envelope put their building up for sale adjacent to this rock. And the auto body guy across the street was using it as a parking lot for broken down cars. It looked like a war zone. And the building was narrow. It was like 50 feet wide by 200 feet deep. And it had like an elevated basement. So I remember we paid like $500 a foot for this building. But in my mind, I paid $250 a foot because nobody valued the basement. And I was like, well, there's windows in the basement. And I'm pretty sure someone's going to want an office here. And there's not enough office in Long Island City, which is like funny to say out loud, but it was the truth. There's not enough office in Court Square with the exception of the Altice building. So, I don't know if you've been to the Court Square IBC, but it feels like LA almost in the way that people work there. It's all human scale buildings. It's walking distance to Jackson, walking distance to the waterfront. But like all the makers that are there have like absolutely no place to go have lunch. They have to like either get it delivered or walk really far. So I see this rock. I start reading, on the DOT's website, there's something called the Street Seats application, which you could like apply to do a public plaza. So I put this building under contract, apply to DOT, get approved in the Street Seats program, get a rendering of what this street is going to look like as a pedestrian plaza, and miraculously get connected with the New York Times. So the New York Times had a company called the Wirecutter, has a company called the Wirecutter that like probably tested the headphones and these microphones, right? So they do all sorts of testing and then they, they're journalists. So they write about them and they sell them on their website. So if you want the best set of headphones, you go to wirecutter.com and you figure it out. So they have a headquarters space in LA. They're looking for a headquarter testing facility in New York. They love the basement and they love the first floor. So they leased the building to make it Wirecutter's headquarter facility. And that was an amazing situation because then they became our anchor. We then acquired a building called Gallant and Wine through a ground lease, which is an electrical distribution company. So they had more space than they needed. They moved into the front warehouse on 11th Street and the back warehouse on 12th Street. They leased to us. And then Polar Distributors is a nice old guy named Howard who sold refrigerators. He was like ready to retire, but he didn't want to sell the building. So I said, okay, Howard, you're going to retire, right? So we put Howard's building in contract, but didn't put a closing date. It was like a 5-year agreement where he had our hard deposit that he was allowed to take out of escrow. And he was able to give us 6 to 8 months notice when he was ready to retire to then trigger the closing date. So there's an example of like, I didn't want to force this guy to sell his building, but I wanted to be the one to buy it. So I probably paid, I don't know, a couple $100,000 more than anyone else, but it was like a keyhole site to the campus we were trying to create. So I gave him the option. It was a small building, 6,000 square feet. And then it was like in the middle of COVID. So I was like, oh no, what am I going to do? So I'm like, Howard, you just elected for me to close, So Howard, I rented the building from Howard during my contract period that allowed me to renovate it after he moved out so that I could close post renovation being completed. And we built these like 500 square foot, like mini kitchens, almost felt like a ghost kitchen setup, but we got several restaurants that wanted the like delivery business, right? So this is like COVID. Everyone's like, I can't do a big restaurant, but we have this public plaza that we built. We have kitchen setup and it's like the center of the universe in Court Square. And it's like become this mini district. So we have Focal Point breweries there and they use the plaza as a, beer garden. They have their own garden and they rented a large space from us in the Gallant and Wine building and put their tap room there. We have a taco restaurant. We have 9th Street Espresso, who's like, an amazing coffee New York institution. They put their roasting facility there. And recently Slam Media leased an office. New York Comedy Club leased an office space there. And this is all happening now. So like I'm reading about failure of office, but because of our thesis and because of like Long Island City's live, work, play situation and how it's got its own life, that micro market is performing very different than, New York's macro market on the office side. And there are plenty of office buildings in Long Island City that are having problems, but they're not so close to transportation. They're all on the other side in the Sunnyside district. That's, you have to take a bus or a shuttle to get to. So in Court Square, in Hunters Point, if you have an office product that's 5 to 10,000 square feet and is a human scale, it's going to lease because people want to be there and they want to work there. There's like 6 Michelin rated restaurants in Long Island City. And, it's no wonder, you have a new population of another 100,000 people and all these new units just showed up. They don't want to leave to go to work, right? They want to work where they live. So, it's amazing to see how that evolved. But I can show you our 2016 thesis that's talking about like the evolution of retail and office in Long Island City in these sections. And I can say we're like completely right, but we're close enough.
I mean, it sounds like you are, given where the environment is versus what you've been doing. And it's funny because I think in Williamsburg, Brooklyn, it was a little different where they had to have the retail there to drag in the residential or bring in the residential. Here, it seems to have been evolved differently.
Yeah.
So there are a number of projects that you're doing with Domain in Gowanus, Mott Haven, a lot of which we've been involved in, MIH, Inclusionary Housing, Voluntary Inclusionary Housing. And we did the assemblage for the Girard Avenue projects.
Some mandatory projects as well, like Carroll.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of stuff going on. I remember when Domain purchased Carroll, which was before the Gowanus rezoning, and Chris and Matt were sitting on it waiting for that rezoning to happen. It was so many years ago. And I'm like, I wonder if this thing is going to happen. That's so clever of them to hold on to this. But how did you get involved? It sounds like you were doing a lot of commercial.
Sure.
How did you get involved in the residential side and maybe even specifically about residential with Domain and others?
Yeah. So off the back of 1133 in Greenpoint, right, we had a site together on 44th Drive in Long Island City that we ultimately sold. We really took a look collectively at mid-rise residential development in the boroughs and really upland sites, not necessarily waterfront sites. And we realized that there's, it's an opportunity in non-union construction in the boroughs to pay attention to the assembly of your building. Like, what does that mean? It means like the brick you choose, the coursing of the brick, the window types, the window size, just assembling all the kit parts that makes a mid-rise multifamily building. And we used 1133 as like the poster child for a programmatic approach to mid-rise rental, large-scale mid-rise rental in New York. And we took a few years to think through the lessons learned associated with that. But, block and plank construction is an example, or double hung windows that are butted up against each other as opposed to a window wall or a curtain wall, or there's like, I can't even tell you how many examples there are. But, having a construction company and being able to build non-union within New York has allowed us to like get an insight into how subcontractors function, the process of construction, understanding the flow of information like we were talking about earlier. And we developed a basis of design for non-union mid-rise rental product in New York City. And I think that it was a complete collaborative process with Domain and VOREA. And we just saw that that's the angle, because in order to be successful in New York, you have to be competitive everywhere. You have to buy it competitively. You have to build it competitively. You got to finance it competitively. You got to be competitively priced. You got to, it's all required. So we had developed this like secret sauce associated with construction assembly. So now we have this construction company. We're trying to create pipeline for it. And, the acquisitions in Gowanus were clear, right? Gowanus was an emerging market. It was going to get rezoned. It's got the Gowanus Canal cleanup. It's not displacing anyone through the rezoning. It's like a, city-backed rezoning. It was an amazing opportunity. So, Chris and I talked through Gowanus, and we talked through the sites that we wanted to target. And we talked through how to acquire them and how to tie them up and what's the best way to problem solve that acquisition, or series of acquisitions. And we then applied this formula related to construction to make the numbers work and allow us to be aggressive on the purchase. And yeah, I think that's the answer.
Yeah. I mean, I was there when a lot of these sites were assembled and purchased. It was obviously wasn't on the inside in the beginning as you were, but it's interesting to see or hear that perspective rather.
Yeah, well, so one project that we're doing together that, is one of my favorites is in Long Island City. So we're doing a fair amount of commercial in Long Island City. We, the thesis we did in 2016, 2017 has evolved 6 years and now is like full circle where we believe that the residential occupant in Long Island City has now matured. It's a new tenant. So the level of product is, now different than it was, say, 6, 10, 15 years ago. And it's more young families. It's, the evolution of that, right? So we just built a school. We built a private school on 50th Avenue. It's just unbelievable.
Yep.
But anyway.
That's a way to keep people in the neighborhood, by the way, because
yeah.
that's one of the reasons I moved out of Brooklyn, because the schools, exactly.
Yeah. So neighborhoods bursting at the seams, bunch of events. So COVID happens, bottom drops out, everyone's terrified. We, had to do this thesis around, what's next? So we stabilized the deals that we currently have in the pipeline. I'm in North Carolina and down for the pandemic and thinking through what are we going to do? So what's the next step? And, I was thinking we can go after deals that are going to go bankrupt or are not going to get finished. But then that felt like being a vulture, right? And not exactly fitting with the ethos of what our, business is in placemaking and wanting to establish a neighborhood and help that neighborhood growth. And our other thought is let's just buy land. If we buy land today, it's going to take us a year to design it, 3 years to build it. It's 4 years away. So yeah, everyone's saying how long will the COVID effects stay? Is it a year? Is it 2 years? Is it 3 years? So no one was saying 4 to 5. And, New York has this amazing, Chris started calling it this, and I agree with him. It has this whiplash effect. So when there's no construction, right, a limited amount of housing, it in 2 or 3 years, it bursts, right? It flips back, rents go up, 15, 20%, and, housing pops in New York. So we felt that, there's a limited amount of supply coming online because of COVID and the pause. Let's tie up, this site in Long Island City, which was a very complicated acquisition. We worked on that together.
Yes, I recall it very fondly.
There's another example of, we didn't get into it earlier, but, VOREA has a construction division, a real estate division, and a bunch of professionals that all function within that space, right? Not to mention brokerage, but we have almost an expertise in zoning, in construction, in real estate, in finance. It's all under one roof. So we don't have to hire consultants to evaluate our underwriting. So our underwriting on analyzing a site within New York, because the zoning is so prescriptive, right? If you're not going for a rezone or a variance, you know what you could build. Well, if you can model what you could build and understand the efficiency of what you could build, right, is what my net to gross is going to be, how many square feet of retail I'm going to have, and what our hard costs are. Well, we have this basis of design on construction. We have, the ability to really model based on all the data that we've kept on what it takes to build this programmatic approach. So we know what our net to grosses are. We know we can really peg what our underwriting looks like. So with that in one place, we were able to figure out how to build an as-of-right deal in Long Island City, last site on the waterfront that had the 7 train running underneath it. So I think our competition thought they had to get a variance. And our approach was, let's figure out how to build this thing as of right, bridge over the 7 train and make it work and not take a year, going or 2 years trying to get a variance. Let's just hit the ground running and make it happen. And we actually partnered up with L&M, who's building the project for us. It's been an amazing run. I think that project is going to be great. It's biggest thing I've ever done or been a part of. And I'm really excited.
Yeah. It was a very exciting time when we were negotiating that agreement. And, a lot of the philosophies that you spoke about earlier resonated during that.
Yeah. That's very indicative of your business model of creativity. Example. Just if you have a problem, you're finding a creative solution. You're working with what you have to better your community and add more value to it.
And you left that possibility open at the end of the day, right? You're still flexible, kind of like Bruce Lee, right? Where
yeah, just like Bruce, only 200 pounds heavier. But yeah, no, I hear you. But that was the difference, right? We were able to buy time because of the issues associated with that building and its inherent issues. But we had solved it and were willing to go hard on our deposit. So we needed the time to close and be able to put it all together, but we were not concerned that we wouldn't be able to move forward.
Yeah.
Right. So, and then we applied. I mean, this is a similar story in Mott Haven. We just finished 2 projects in Mott Haven together that are unbelievable.
They're huge.
There's two
really are.
buildings that are across the street from each other on Girard Avenue, 445 and 414 Girard. They're currently leasing up. And, the interior design is unbelievable. That product is like the fact that it's in the Bronx and market rate and affordable and, like mixed income. It's like, you should see the Instagram handle. I wish I knew the handle, but I'm showing it to my friends. I'm showing it to my family, and they're just like floored that design is it's in the Bronx. And we're up against, right, the who's who of developers, Brookfield just down the road and everyone else on the waterfront there. I think that's the greatest place to live in Mott Haven right now.
Yeah, I think the philosophy of creating that neighborhood, the community, if you build things, if you provide the infrastructure, if you do the plazas like you did, if you find out what the community needs, and we've talked about this with some others on this podcast in previous episodes, that creates an availability of business opportunities and opportunities to build for you.
Yeah, we, in setting up the brokerage platform Igloo, so, in 2017, we had done a fair amount of commercial leasing. We ran into the, understanding that, small business in New York needed a bit of handholding to solve their real estate needs. So we were hired as a construction manager to build some, I remember a facility in the Brooklyn Navy Yard. It was like a manufacturer of like camouflage gear and helmets. Some guys that, were Cooper Union grads that I knew indirectly. We wound up getting hired to help them build their 85,000 square foot headquarters space. And it was an awesome project, but they needed real estate advice. They needed to help negotiate their lease. They needed, questions answered related to free rent and all sorts of stuff. And we had done a deal with Sonder. We had done a deal with Compass. We were doing this deal with the New York Times and the Wirecutter. And we were building these headquarters spaces for these companies in New York. So we said, let's just do that firsthand. Let's figure out who is in the market. Let's figure out where they want to be. Let's figure out if those markets overlay with our theses. And let's see if we could help them. So we created a company called Igloo, and Igloo acts as like a white glove real estate consulting firm for small business in New York. It's technically a brokerage firm, but 9 times out of 10, we're going to be your landlord, or we're going to help you figure out how to get the lease. Or if we're not your landlord, we're going to renovate it for you because you want to move into a space and you have to renovate it, or someone has to renovate it for you. Navigating through the New York City DOB system and the approval process and the design and construction process, you're an expert at making widgets. You make the greatest widgets in the world. But can you build an office space in New York City? That's a bit of a specialty. So we try to be a one-stop solution. And that has really opened the door because that data then feeds into our thesis data on all these individual ecosystems in the markets that we invest in.
Yeah. So, and around we go, right? It feeds on itself.
It's very synergistic. It's really rewarding. And honestly, any real estate developer you talk to, placemaking is probably their most favorite part of the business. And it's certainly mine. And it allows you to feel like you're truly a creative, right? Not so much a capitalist, but more of a creative, right? That's where we're all trying to be. And I think that, we are lucky enough to have assembled, a team of professionals that care about it just as much as I do.
I know firsthand.
Totally.
You're more like your sister than you think because you are an artist, and the things that you're doing is art, and it takes a lot of thought behind it.
Great.
The only other question I have is 421A. 421A. We got to ask this, and we haven't even asked this a lot lately. But MIH is not happening without 421A. Yes, the projects that you're working on with Domain, those are going forward. They've met the deadline. And the other projects we're working on for voluntary with you and Domain, similarly. What's your stance in terms of are you going to just proceed doing commercial in New York? Are you looking to go out of state? Is there anything that VOREA is doing to try to convince the legislature or couple up with REBNY or any other groups to try to get things going in terms of the tax exemption?
Yeah, I think that New York City needs 421A to build more housing or a replacement for 421A. I don't think anybody's denying that. I think there are a lot of bigger powers that be working on trying to clear that path. And, we are, a pimple in the scheme of things.
A very beautiful pimple, by the way.
Very beautiful pimple, right. So right now what I'm focused on is, okay, that's the problem. How do I solve for it a different way? How can I build market rate and mixed use housing in New York City without 421A? That's what I've tasked our firm with figuring out. And we have a couple ideas. We haven't completely flushed them out yet, but I think that's a path. Obviously, you could build condo, But how do you build condo with MIH? Well, you'd add a separate building, right, for the MIH. But does the MIH get a tax abatement? Does it not? I mean, there's like a lot of, funky thoughts around building condo. And then, well, if you want to build a 200 or 300 unit building, there's a handful of people building 200 and 300 unit condos, but we're not one of them. And I don't think I can get that financed where we are today. But if we could figure out another use or another way to, I don't want to say circumvent a tax abatement, but just solve for, profitability within that a residential execution. That's what we're trying to solve for.
Well, I think our listeners, and I myself personally, would be very interested to know, I'm not going to force you to tell us, but what your thoughts are and how you do plan on building. So maybe we'll have an off-the-record discussion.
No, I think episode 37, I'll show up.
We're not that far from there.
What episode?
I think this, we're probably going to be like 15 or 16 at this point. We're not that, maybe you want to do 270.
Yeah, no, I don't want to go that far.
No, we have to get him back. Don't let him leave.
I'll do episode 50.
That sounds good. We'll do like the centennial.
Amazing.
Centennial.
Yeah. Well, thank you for coming in for this one.
Real pleasure. Thank you. Sorry I didn't ask you guys any questions.
No, this is all about you. We're in for you.
You can ask as many questions as you want when we're on the clock.
Right. I'll bill you for it.
Yes. Is there anything we forgot to ask you that you would like to tell us?
No, I don't know. For those of you listening that, want to open up your own business or follow your own path, I think that is great. And I think you should do it. But I think you should completely remember that it takes a village. And what I've learned in setting up the company and running the company is that, I'm not by myself. I have a social circle that are my best friends from growing up, my cousins from growing up, and my parents and my family and my wife, and I, rely on them. And then I have a team in the office that complement me. They're the yin to our yang, and it takes a village to get it all done. And the other thing I would say is nothing runs itself. Nothing runs itself. It all takes work. You've got to be on it every day. You've got to show up, and you got to do the work to get it done. And
and if you need help in your village, or if you need consultants to help you for you, info at sideandshine.com.
We're always here for you. And Peter's always, we're constantly talking. And I think I probably saw your face more during COVID than I did anybody else because the amount of conference calls we were on. It was absolutely amazing to have you here. I'm so happy you agreed to be on. I think you've imparted a lot of knowledge to me. We're not that far in years apart, but your experience has changed me. And what you think of your mentors, I feel I have a similar relationship with myself and you because of the things that I've learned. And I wanted to thank you from the bottom of my heart because I really learned and am continue to learning so much from you and from the transactions and your out of the box thinking. And thank you for coming and sharing everything with us.
Thank you for coming.
Thank you very much.
Yep.
Well, everyone, that's our show. Thanks so much for listening.
And of course, don't forget to subscribe. Also, don't forget to leave comments because we love to hear from our audience, right, Brenda?
Yeah, feel free to reach out at info@sideandshine.com or visit our website at sideandshine.com. We really look forward to hearing from you.
You could also reach out to David and Brenda at dshamshovich@sideandshine.com and bslakowski at sideandshine.com.
Those are lengthy last names. You can just find us on our website.
That's right.